Hi, welcome to season 7. This is episode 2 of a topic that we're calling the dark side of marketing. I'm Mary Abazia, and with me is Tom Spitali and Sean Willem. Hi, guys.
Hi.
The reason we chose this topic is because we are always looking for examples of great and not so great marketing. And we want to understand what makes things work, if you will, the science of marketing. And what we found through some of these examples that we're going to share with you in this season is that there are positive things that you can apply to your business. So we're going to take you through some of the dark side. Tom, what do we got today?
Well, today we're going to talk about the documentary that's currently playing and very popular on Netflix, called The Social.
That's appropriate too.
Yes, called the Social Dilemma, and I think all marketers should watch it. Very, very poignant. The premise of the documentary is this: they talk to a number of people who were very instrumental in creating a lot of the functionality that's prevalent in social media today. I mean, they had people that were part of the artificial intelligence that drives Facebook. They had the creator of the like button on, and other people that were really in the early days just trying to figure out how these social media companies could monetize all of the interactions that they were creating. And all of them were very clear that they were very innocently just trying to create a functioning business model, but all of them had the same concern. And that is that the artificial intelligence, the functionality of these social media programs are really incentivizing some harmful behavior. It's all now designed to benefit advertisers, and the individuals that are using these social media platforms are sort of like the victims. In many cases can be unwitting consumers who are being led to believe certain things are true that aren't necessarily true, that are just opinion. But even more scary, younger people are being drawn into sort of this environment of never enough, never good enough, always seeing the idealized version of their friends and starting to behave in some scary ways just to try to sort of keep up with what's going on. So that's the social dilemma. And the documentary is really about what can be done about this genie that's out of the bottle. How can we make certain adjustments to this so that it can be a force for good or for better, and not this dark thing that it's turning out to be in many instances.
Yeah, I think what intrigues me about this is we know that big data is going to get bigger, and how it really applies to our businesses is important. And they draw a distinction of a tool being there like a hammer ready to use at any time. But when it is manipulative and is used for a bad outcome, that's where it kind of crosses the line, if you will. And so I was intrigued by it. I thought my favorite quote was, "If you're not paying for the product, you are the product." Mm. So they're, playing off of all the psychology, all the things that we try to do from a marketing standpoint, but it's affecting one of the other quotes was, it affects the real world behavior and emotions without triggering any awareness that it's happening. Yeah. People are clueless that this is happening to them. And that's scary, but it's very real. I mean, we're all living it every day. My kids are. So that's why I think that it's interesting to start looking at it more and more in different ways. So Sean, what are your thoughts on this one?
Well, I didn't get my Netflix, which, by the way, is a brilliant name. That you should own that. I've not seen the documentary. Obviously, I'm fairly aware of the broad topic. I think from a marketing perspective, the power of social media is probably the same thing that you guys are talking about. That is this dilemma that the micro targeting that you're able to do. If you have a product or a service, or even an idea, which is where it gets quite scary, but you can find an audience that has been algorithmically chosen to be open to that product. That should make our job as marketers a lot smarter, a lot more efficient, a lot more effective. You should be able to promote your product to the sorts of people that would want that product. But there's a couple of dark, that's all well and good, but there's a couple of dark sides that I see. One is this, it's self-fulfilling, in as much if you start to look up flat earth or aliens, the Queen of England is a shape-shifting lizard, or other theories, if you start to consume that sort of stuff, and by the way, only one of those two is true. I'm not going to say which one. I'll leave that for you.
You should know, since you didn't see it, that flat earthers were part of the social dilemma and that whole phenomena. So
yeah, then you get positively reinforced. Right. Your views get reinforced, and then people that are having maybe the doubts you've had express why those doubts are not valid, and you start to be in this bubble, as it's known psychologically, that you only get the feedback, you only get this confirmation of your views, you never get a challenge to them. Having said that, that's not really our issue as marketers, right? That's just an unfortunate byproduct of the system. I think what's also interesting that marketers can learn is social media companies, the monetization algorithm, it comes down to one thing: keep those eyeballs on the screen.
Right.
You don't want people leaving. So they're trying to find, serving up enough interesting content, enough challenging content, so as they can expose you to more of the ads. They are more valuable the more people are watching it. And they do that through a ton of techniques. And it goes back to like B.F. Skinner, the operant conditioning, the rats in a box pressing the pedals to get the food pellets. That whole mindset of operant conditioning happens in social media. We're all being conditioned. We're now the rats in the box. We keep pressing that lever for the next story or the next video. And that's also both socially difficult, because it does create these very narrow points of view. But from a marketing perspective, if someone isn't a flat earther or a weird conspiracy theorist, but is always looking for information on strategy, or is always looking for information on how they can run their business more effectively, and you have a product to answer that, it's a great opportunity to get your product in front of people that are really mine. So it's a fine balance, isn't it? From marketers, we like niche audiences that have shared characteristics. That's the basis of segmentation. But from members of society, we don't want to think of people just being spoon-fed the same regurgitated stuff, because it doesn't encourage critical thinking. Yeah. But like I said, I've not seen it, so I think I'm going to watch it after this.
Well, you've got 80% of it already, including the shape-shifting lizard that is the Queen of England. No, I'm just kidding. That part is not on, but I'm sure you can find that somewhere. Yeah, I think that what our purpose here is to figure out, from all of these dark side topics, what can we learn from it to help our audience. And Sean, I think you nailed one of them on the head there. I mean, this idea of this keeping people interested and learning is highly important to marketers, because there's just so much noise in the marketplace. If you can get somebody's interest and you can keep their interest long enough so that they can understand what you're trying to say, do in the marketplace, that's what we can learn. We can take pieces of what the social media marketers are doing. Gamification is something that we've talked about on this podcast. But I think that the ethical thing that marketers can learn from this is truth is going to be almost differentiating in this world. And what I mean by that is, Sean, again, having not seen it, I'm amazed that you kind of nailed this idea that the polarization of society is a big part of this. You're constantly in a world now, a micro world, in a niche where everybody believes the same things that you do. And you start to look at the other side as completely stupid or irrational. One of the people said, when they said, what is the ultimate end of all of this polarization? And he said 2 words: civil war. And that scared the hell out of me. Even in our country, in the United States here, where Mary and I are, you hate to think that it could go to that, but you kind of look at the recent election here, and you start to say, well, in some cases, I could see that. What does that all mean for marketers? If you make a concerted effort to be truthful, maybe even pointing out your own shortcomings, and being vulnerable and transparent, I think truth and trust is going to be the thing that benefits marketers more than anything. Can you be trustworthy in this age where nobody trusts anybody, where everything's so polarized? And what are the things that you can do to be trustworthy, including being vulnerable and pointing out things that maybe you wouldn't normally point out if it was just, the traditional forms of marketing and advertising where you're a cheerleader all the time.
It's interesting, Tom, that point, it's slightly separate but relevant, I think, to this discussion is the idea of vulnerability or being human, being fallible. We're always held to these high, back to the social media stuff, people are always, particularly young people, have to present an idealized version of themselves.
Yeah.
And in the corporate world, in marketing, we come to that trap too. We've always got to be the best, the greatest. And of course, we know logically we can't be, not consistently and not in all things, but we're forced to do that. And I'm reminded of one bit of advice I got in public speaking. And it was, if you walk up to a lectern, to a podium, you're going to make a speech to a large group of people, trip up, stumble and catch yourself and say, oh, nearly fell over then. And they reckon this would engender a sense of sympathy and empathy with the audience of like, oh my God, that's what I would do. I would exactly do that. I'd drop my... And if you plan it, now I'm not suggesting that's obviously a little bit disingenuous, but nevertheless, showing that vulnerability up front warms people to you. And there's a fine art to that. And I'd also say with the lessons from what it sounds like this documentary is about, some of the standards of marketing are there too. Relevancy. You have to be relevant to keep your audience interested. You have to be frequent. You've got to be in their face a lot of touches, a lot of repetition. And you've also got to find that position that resonates, which is part of the relevancy, but then you can't dilute it by trying to be all things to all people. You've got to double down on your position and say, we're the people. We use in our classes HSBC Bank, and I'm not sure if they still use this slogan, but the world's local bank was the slogan that we've talked about as very good global positioning. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it is still their slogan, but when they were using that, everything had to relate to it. The imagery, the messaging, the locations of those ads had to be supporting that message. So strong positioning, being relevant, good repetition, a bit of vulnerability, a bit of honesty, a bit of credibility. These are all the tools the social media platforms use, and we should take a lesson out of their books and say, for our business, let's be a micro version of that.
I agree. And I think we have, and I'm going to be very specific about a business case here, one of our past clients that performed amazingly well by being vulnerable. And one of the reasons that people out there might say, oh, I can't be vulnerable, there's no return on investment in this. Well, listen to this. We all three had the pleasure of working with the former Wyeth Nutrition. And they are now part of Nestle. And Wyeth Nutrition competes in the infant formula market, where the claims in the infant formula market were always about, this is the best, most scientific, solution, and the closest to breast milk of any of our competitors, and the kind of chest beating that's really very, I guess that was a bad analogy. I'm hot today, but that was so typical, right? Then they decided to be vulnerable, and their lead slogan was what? Breast is best. Breast is best. So they were just basically saying, it's our solution isn't the best. Breast is best. But if you need infant formula, take a look at ours. And that was really a powerful part of their growth. And they ended up being purchased by Nestle for $11 billion, which was some kind of like 6 or 7 times multiple of their annual sales. And I think that that's a real example of being vulnerable and having it turn into a very, very successful business that's very trustworthy, that grew to the point where you got purchased by an iconic company for a huge multiple.
Yeah, that authenticity works, doesn't it? That honesty, it just feeds into that credibility. And I think something you said earlier, Tom, and I agree, is things come and go into fashion. Sometimes it's all flash and brash and screaming from the rooftops how great you are, and sometimes a little humility is good. And I would guess, given where the world is at the moment and the recent changes in the electoral cycle that we've seen, I'm feeling that a bit of humility is probably overdue. And we've all been humbled by this virus too, and I think that's to me is maybe now's as good a time as any to embrace that sort of honest, credible, vulnerable, normal, human values, I guess.
I think I like the big lessons that you guys are pulling out. For me, I am a nerd, and I love the science part of what we are seeing here too, and just the immense amount of opportunity we have to understand, as you were saying, Sean, the targets better, where their head really is. I mean, we're always trying to do market research to figure it out. Well, these tools that we have now, the algorithms, are going to even allow us more to understand really where they are and where are our opportunities to win. And as long as it's done ethically, as we're all saying, it's just such an amazing opportunity as we move as marketers into this digital era more and more. And we watch how our competitors are playing too, because that'll be an interesting new chess game that we're going to be looking at here. So, any closing thoughts, guys?
No, note to self: watch the documentary. That's my closing thought.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Outside of our area of expertise, monitor your children's screen time.
Yeah, actually, one of our clients, actually several of our clients, we just mentioned this topic and they said, oh, make sure to do something on social media and this social dilemma. So actually, one of the reasons that we're doing this topic is because it came from our clients. So as always, we would love to hear any of your feedback on this topic or others. And you can hear all of our podcasts on theaccidentalmarketer.com or wherever you get your podcasts. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.